So I'm going to look at GEO and reputation. What I would say to you is reputation is now more important than ever, and AI cares about your reputation. As Stephen was saying, SEO does still matter, but all we thought about before was where do I come up on Google? We didn't think about what answers will I get on a prompt. So it's about answers. It's 0 clicks. What answers are you getting when you prompt the LLMs? And have we checked it? Do we know what answers we're getting? And are we doing that consistently? But I'll say more about that. So GEO is reputation in action. It doesn't care about paid for, and I'll get into the data on that. It cares about what others are saying about you and the credibility of those. So reputation is reflected back in those answers you get from AI. So the data. So this is Muckrake. This is a 2025 survey. Basically, 95% comes from non-paid sources. So you're earned and owned. That's where it's at, earned and owned. And nearly 90% of that is earned. So journalists, trade, analysts, all really important. It's time sensitive. So building on what Stephen was saying, we all think that AI, or ChatGPT in particular, is dated. It hasn't been updated. That's different. It's different now. If you ask it a question, it will give you the right answer, unless it's hallucination. But most of the time, it'll give you the right answer. And I'll get to why some of your content on your prompts can create hallucinations as well. But journalists, they care about yesterday's article. That's really, really important now. So that's something to keep in mind as I'm talking through this, because you do need to be always on. One big campaign is not going to win the race on AI. You have to be consistent, and thought leadership is more important than ever over press releases. So announcing a number of jobs, yes, that'll get you headlines and a bump, but it won't get you that consistent authority you need for AI to use you in answers. So that's really, really important. And then just feeding into, Stephen's already covered this, and we all know, blah, 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 Reddit. And another buyer beware with Reddit is it takes a lot of work to do anything on Reddit. It's a full-time job. But what I think is interesting, and why I think AI likes it so much, is how it's laid out, right? So it's laid out in a way that's very scannable for AI. So that's why it pulls from it. So you have to keep that in mind in your own content. And I know Stephen touched on that already, and I'll give you a little bit more on it. But also, YouTube is number 3, lads. How many of us actually spend time on YouTube? I hope you do. But people don't, right? We don't. It's the forgotten one. It's the last, unless you're a very video heavy company. But we're creating stuff for Instagram, we're creating stuff for LinkedIn. Are we creating and transcribing onto YouTube? We should be, for the very purposes of GEO. And I know it's really hard to read, and I apologize, but all the social channels are here. So it is really important to have your own content right on your social channels. So what does that mean? If it's owned and earned, consistency is key. And it's probably the first conversation I had with Stephen when he said, well, we're now talking to robots and humans. So you've got to think of it that way. Yes, it still needs to be engaging for the humans, but the robots need to be able to understand it. So traditionally, you'd have your big campaign, you'd have a big, firework on something, one and done. You need now to develop your narrative consistently. And that narrative development needs to be across all touch points. It can't just exist on earned media and not on your owned. It needs to be everywhere, and it needs to be consistent, because if it's not, if it's fragmented, your AI is fragmented, you're not an authority. So narrative discipline is more important than ever. And how do we create that narrative discipline? Well, obviously, you've your own platforms, but also you've got to think about your reference data. Where is your company referenced? I know I've had many experiences with companies where you go in, they've done a rebrand, and you go and look at some directory and they're still named the old company or the old directors or the old website. That happens all the time, right? It's really important it doesn't. Now, Wikipedia is there because, like Reddit, everyone's talking about Wikipedia and Reddit. But Wikipedia, I have first-hand experience of this, is incredibly hard to change. So you can't actually, you can change it, but it takes time, especially if it's not the original author that's going to them. So Wikipedia, you definitely should have it as brand authority, especially if you've got a situation where you're a brand that could be confused with another brand that maybe isn't all that positive. Wikipedia is incredibly strong because it ranks so well from an SEO and a GEO point of view. But the really low-hanging fruit is industry directories. So what are you members of? What are you associated with? Are they accurate? Is the narrative correct? Is it the consistent narrative that you want to get across? When was the last time you checked them? So that's really, really important. And then Google My Business, Apple Connects, all of that, really important. Reviews, GEO, like SEO, loves a review. Reviews can be our torment, I know, but they are extremely important now going forward. So consistency for LLMs equals brand recognition. And then going back to the owned content, where does this fit in? It's the foundation. So when we're doing our own PR, pushing out to journalists, analysts, trades, they're going to go and look at the website. They're going to go and look and make sure you're credible, authoritative, that it's accurate. So you need to make sure the content you have on your website is really strong. Expert pages are something that is really being pushed at the moment. Not just a short bio, but an expert page. So if you're trying to push someone as a thought leader, having an expert page on your website with backlinks to earned media they've had coverage in can be incredibly strong. Not only for those journalists you're trying to push it to, but for LLMs as well. So that's something to consider, and where owned can be incredibly strong. They need to work together. There needs to be consistency. And I know Stephen has touched on this, but just to go through it very briefly, accuracy, obviously, clear authorship, bylines, make sure you byline everything. Try and take ownership of your content, make sure it's published on your own platforms. You know, from an earned point of view, I would always say don't do that. But the minute you have pitched it and secured it, get it up on your own platforms, because then the LLM will see you as the authority. Sentence structure. Think about when you put a question into ChatGPT, for example, the way it gives it back to you. Headings, bullet points, loves them. Loves an old bullet point. Short sentences. If you have long, complex sentences and you put them in, they will it'll never say to you, I don't know. It won't say, I don't know, I don't understand. It'll give you some rubbish back. And you're like, why is it giving me this? It hasn't understood your sentence. More than likely. Now, there's other reasons, but that's a very strong reason why you get hallucinations, gobbledygook back. Keep it short, keep your sentence short, keep your paragraph short, 2 to 3 sentences max, and maintain a logical flow, right? So think about how you get your information back again, the intro, the content, the example, the conclusion. That is what AI likes. Have that. Think about your case studies, for example, but bullet points in your case studies. Facts, data, backlinks to the earned media you may have got, all ups your ranking and credibility. Engagement, as Stephen said, FAQs, fact sheets, all really important. Deeper understanding, those case studies I was talking about, or if you have, you know, a white paper or more data. So for example, if you've got earned content on a certain piece of data, there may be more data to support it. Have that on your owned platform. I mean, in an ideal world, we all know this, it's the same as SEO. You'd get a backlink to your owned content on the earned content. Not always possible, but again, really, really important. Keep it fresh. Keep it fresh, keep it fresh. Same as SEO. Exact same. Keep it fresh, always on. So it matters more than ever. The big hit campaigns, the one and done, it won't give you the reward you want. If you're not out there consistently pushing your messaging, pushing your narrative, you know, commentary, industry debates, media presence, well, then you're going to be invisible. I suppose taking the first steps, and I know Stephen mentioned those astronomically expensive platforms, and unfortunately, there really is nothing else out there that is more affordable at the moment besides a good old Excel spreadsheet with your list of prompts and the responses you get. But you've got to start doing that if you want to see what return you can get from changing up your narrative and making sure it's consistent, and doing all the donkey work of looking through all your data references, making sure it's accurate and up to date, making sure it's got the right backlinks on it. All of that stuff will make a big difference. So I'll hand over now to Judie, who's going to bring you through video and the importance of it. Thank you.
Brilliant.